Welcome to Unfinished, where we talk about how we live intentionally to make the rest of our lives the best of our lives. We talk about new ventures, new learning, new adventure, new experiences, new relationships, new businesses, and how we continue to grow and learn. Welcome back, my friend,
Thanks,
for
man.
episode 2. For those who didn't watch the first episode, Soldier Sailor, we've got Tim back to talk about the rest of the journey. And just to recap, what we covered last time, Tim, was how you ended up in the UK as the Canadian Army liaison officer to the UK, and what you went through that cataclysmic period where you left the army, you went through a very difficult divorce, you met somebody, you got married. You not only left the army, try to find, gainful employment during COVID.
Yeah.
And ultimately where we ended was, and there's a lot of good in that, you met Cara, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of where we finished. So, you guys had gone through the difficult period, bought a house, started a viable business, which is how we met. And then you decided to sell the house, to sell the business, buy a boat and go sailing. Now, I know both of you, and I know one of you has always had this dream to go sailing. I know the other one likes being in a bikini, which fortunately is not you.
Not me.
So let's start there, my friend. And then I do want to touch on, go back a little bit into your military background as well, because I think a lot of, your ability, your grit and your ability to absorb what you've had to was formed, I think, in that period. But yeah, the boat. How, where, how, why?
The boat. So I had a dream, like a dream, like I'd love to do this kind of a dream, not a sleeping dream. Pretty much all my life, like probably, I probably watched, the Disney movie Treasure Island, like the 1950s version at some point when I was a kid, and was like, that's what I want to do, not be a pirate. Well, it would have been cool to be a pirate. But the whole sailing, the sailboat, the exotic locale, the palm tree covered island. And then as life kind of progressed for me, through my, early adulthood and my profession and stuff, it never really, I really didn't have much to do with the sea. I mean, obviously I joined the Army, not the Navy, and although in my Army career I did work for and with the Navy at different times, which was fantastic and actually gave me some really good experience. But it wasn't until my kids were, so I had this dream. So at one point, my oldest kids were kind of, maybe in their tweens. And I'd gotten to a point professionally where, we were comfortable financially, and my ex was working as well. And I remember saying, it's funny. I remember saying to her, I want to buy a Harley. I'd always wanted to buy a Harley. And I know this is like, it sounds like I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but she was a nurse, or is a nurse. And so she, of course, has this like, very pragmatic view of motorcycles. And she didn't want her husband and the father of her children, who was already a bit of like an adrenaline junkie and had, worked in a dangerous profession, riding a motorcycle. So she said, oh, you want to buy a Harley? Well, she said, why don't we buy a sailboat instead? And I was like, sold. Right. So we went, we went, exactly. Like, look over here. Right. Oh yeah. Over there, squirrel. So brilliant. So we started looking around, and the money that I would have put into a Harley, we bought like a used, 30-foot-ish, 27-foot, I think, sailboat that was then fantastic because I was posted to a base called Petawawa, or in a town called Petawawa in Ontario in Canada. It's on a river, which is more like a lake than a river. I mean, it's a mile wide. Oh, wow. At the base, white sand beaches, a beautiful, nice. Pine wooded
in Canada,
cliffy hills. Yeah. And we had like this huge space, like probably 16 nautical miles of sailing space. And the boat was big enough and sort of newish enough. I mean, it wasn't new by any means. It was about 40 years old when we bought it. But, it had like a little stove in it so you could cook and boil water. And it had like a couple bunks, like a caravan that you could, you convert the kitchen table into a bunk and all that.
Got it,
and it was great with like young kids, right? And so we'd go on the weekends, or we'd go for a week in the summer. And it was like camping, but on a boat. kind of learning to sail, which was a whole other, sort of interesting journey with my ex-wife. Not entirely pleasant, as you can imagine. It's a lot of swearing, a lot of yelling. But anyways, and then it was like, this is it, man. Like, this is super cool. So we did that. We, over a period of about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, we owned 2 boats. So at one point we sold that boat and we kind of upgraded to a newer, fancier, more highly spec'd boat. And when it was the kids' summertime thing with us, and my youngest started taking sailing lessons, and so got some experience sailing, and then thought at that point, this is what I want to do when I retire. I want to, and as there's like plenty of YouTubers living this lifestyle, so started serial watching, YouTuber, Vagabond, and all those guys, and that's it, man. Want to sail across the Pacific to Tahiti, and all that stuff. And that actually was my ex's and my retirement plan. That, so our sort of financial efforts towards retirement were all based on that goal, being that at whatever point we retired, we would sell the house, buy a boat, and go off sailing. And then when everything sort of fell apart, and I think I probably talked last time, for me, it was a very long process. Like, I knew I was, unhappy for a long time. And actually for a long time had been thinking, this is a complete fallacy. Like, this is not going to happen, because I don't think I can do this with this person. And so meeting Cara and getting divorced, I let go of that dream, because I thought to myself, well, I mean, Cara's never sailed. She's not interested. There's so many other obstacles in our way. There's so much we need to overcome to just get to be together, as we talked about in the last podcast. That I just thought, and I thought, you know what, it's actually not that important to me. Like, I'm content in the life that I have right now. And if that means that whatever that looks like moving forward, as long as I'm with Cara and we're, working out together. I mean, that's our thing, fitness together. That's enough, we take some vacations, and then we had an opportunity the first, or maybe the second year that we owned the gym, where we started to make a bit of money. Like, the business was making a bit of money. So we took some money out of the gym and to take a vacation. And I said, would you like to go sailing? And Cara said, sure. So we went to the Caribbean. We hired a sailboat. And by that point, I had the qualifications and experience I needed to be able to do that and just go the two of us. So we hired a 45-foot sailboat and went sailing for a week in Antigua. And like you said, Cara likes to be in a bikini. She likes the sun. She likes the sea. She was like, this is fantastic. And so that the dream sort of reinserted itself into my reality, where for a couple of years it had been not in my, well, actually for many years, it had not been in my reality.
Not viable.
And so I said, well, what would you think if, when we retire, whenever that is, because at that point we weren't thinking, there was a long way. Cara's kids were younger than mine, so they were still living between us and Cara's ex-husband on a weekly kind of a routine. And we'd open the gym. So she said, yeah, I think that would be really cool. I think I would do that. So then we started watching together all these YouTubers, because I wanted her to get a bit of an idea of what, and we did a little bit more. We started going to boat shows and looking at boats and talking about boats, and we thinking, so she was all in to this idea of sailing.
What was the trigger then to actually then go and do it? Right.
So the trigger to go and do it. So I think we probably talked about last time about how the gym was sort of a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And the 5-year plan was based on Cara's kids.
Got it.
So it was kind of like, if you don't worry yourself too much about like uni or whatever, you sort of think, okay, well, when the kids are 18 or when they're done secondary school, there's going to be an element of independence.
Yeah.
And at that point we could start to think about, a retirement of some sort.
Yeah.
So the gym was a 5-year plan. And that was kind of then, when we started talking again about maybe buying a sailboat, sell the house, buy a sailboat, and go sail around the world, quote unquote. Although that was never an objective, as an objective thing. It was just, you would say to people, well, we're going to go sail around,
Mm.
meaning we were going to go sail from
Somewhere.
country to country
Yeah,
and in warm places, very important, warm places. So there was the 5-year plan, and then at about year, I don't know, I'm thinking it was the end or sometime during the second year of owning the gym, that 5-year plan was completely disrupted when Kara's kids went to live with their dad and cut us off completely. And you know, I mean, you read into that what you will. I mean, I think Kara's ex-husband played a very key strategy to enable that to happen. But they left, and they stopped even communicating with Kara, which of course is, I mean, it sounds stupid to say, but it's just really, really shattering.
Yeah.
But we were immersed in the gym, and still, you know, I don't remember how many part-time coaches we had, but I mean, it was still like a 7-day a week, you know, 12 hours, 16-hour days, like just absolutely. So we just carried on, like sort of on autopilot. Like, we're in this thing now. We don't have any, there's no option to get out of it without just folding everything, which was never an option. And so we carried on for, I don't know, another 10 or 12 months or something. And then I'm sure there was something that triggered it, but at some point we just looked at ourselves and said, why are we doing this? You know, what the raison d'etre, the reason for having the gym in the first place was to do something we loved here in Newbury, where the kids were in school, because I couldn't just retire. We couldn't just sit at home. We needed to do something. And of course, the gym was extremely valuable and meaningful, and, you know, meaningful work and helping people and meeting people and all that stuff. Like, it was just so rewarding, but it was also just absolutely exhausting, and in many ways very isolating, because I think, you know, people, you know, to a degree, you get put on a bit of a pedestal because you're the coach.
So your friends are your customers.
Our whole social circle were clients, right?
I was your client, basically. I was a paying member of your business.
So it was very, you know, like I said, we were so overwhelmed and caught up in it that for a period of time after the kids left, we were just, you know, this is it, this is life, we carry on. And then at some point, something sort of snapped. And we said, like, why are we doing this? Like, you know, why are we working so hard? And there's lots of really good answers to that. Like, well, we have this great community of people whose lives have been changed by this business that we have and by what we're doing. And we're helping more people, and, you know, and the business isn't mature yet. There's lots of work to be done. I mean, there's lots of, you know, and this is as good a place as any to live anywhere in the world, really. I mean, it's a lovely town. You know, there's lots and lots of answers to that question. But ultimately for us, the reason that we were here and doing that was because of Kara's kids.
And I think, you know, Tim, it's very easy in that scenario to stay in that scenario. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's, and again, you know, this is applicability to so many things in so many people's lives. I think, you know, what you guys did was said, well, actually, you know, it's a mild, gentle stream.
Yeah.
But actually, we want to go and do something else, right?
Yeah.
And so you did.
Yes.
You did. I mean, I know circumstantially you had your head coach and he had interest in the business and buying the business and all of that. But that wasn't why you sold it. You sold it because you'd made the decision to go sailing, in a sense.
Yes.
So what happened then? Because, I mean, you needed a boat, right?
Well, we needed a boat. So first of all, when we asked ourselves this question, what we realized was that for about 2 years, we'd been living, like, our, you know, day-to-day living expenses. We'd been living on my pension because Cara had quit her job to help run the gym, to help get this business off the ground. And then we hadn't taken any, other than to go on that sailing vacation, we hadn't taken any income out of it. We didn't pay ourselves. I mean, we never paid me. And at the height of things, we paid Cara the minimum amount that she wouldn't be taxed. So it was like £750 a month or something. So but at that point we'd never taken any income out. So I realized like, well, actually we've been living on for the last, year and a half or 2 years, we've been living on my pension, which means we could live on my pension, which means we could be retired. Like there was no financial necessity to then making the business. So then it was practical stuff. It was, what do we do with the business? Do we, kind of three options, right? We just fold. We just close the business, sell all the equipment at auction, walk away from the lease, whatever, which was never for those of you from Freesol, that was never an option.
And I know,
but it was an option in like an academic sense, but it was never one we were going to do. Option two was find someone to run the business, and we remain owners, and then staff the business sufficiently such that a general manager or whatever you want to call them could run the business, and we could then just disappear and take an income out of it, and do a video call once a month and give some direction, and essentially be detached. And a good friend of mine advised me that was a bad idea, if you remember.
They were right.
Yeah, indeed. Can you imagine? And then the third option was to sell the business, and like that one was the preferred option, especially after you and I spoke about it. It kind of, got me thinking along those lines. But then, not only had I never been an entrepreneur, and I'd been institutionalized for the past, 30 years.
You did a bloody good job, by the way.
And never run a business before, but I'd never sold a business before. And then how do you sell a gym? Like the only thing that you could directly monetize was the equipment, which, like anything, is worth a fraction of what it's worth when it's brand new in the box, right? So
you're selling the membership and the future value.
Yeah. So that was it, right? It was sort of just a ton of research into like how do we, and then effectively, it's only worth what someone will pay for it. We spoke to our bookkeepers, and they gave us some ideas about like how we could valuate it. And again, it was a sort of like annual revenue plus growth potential plus, divided by whatever, kind of a thing.
It's smoke and mirrors, yeah. It's not a science.
Yeah, but fortunately we had a pretty good business plan from the get-go. I mean, we paid for some business mentorship, which was brilliant. We asked a lot of advice from people in the gym business, people who we knew who owned other CrossFit gyms. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things we did really well. And so we had a good business plan in terms of growing the business and growing it to the point where having someone run it for us was an option, which, as you can appreciate, means a lot of things. You need to make enough money to hire people, and you need to be able to pay those people enough money that their output is a quality output and not just, a minimum wage. And you need to be able to set up a pension plan and, all these things. So we had gotten the business to the point where we had for about 8 months time, maybe 6 months time at that point, a full-time kind of assistant general manager is what we called him, who was learning over that period of time, coaching, but also learning how to run the business and learning all the mechanics of, all the little bits and pieces that people don't even think about, but like the cleaning and the maintaining the toilets and who do you call when the, heat stops working and, all that stuff. And then we'd actually then gotten to the point where we were going to hire a second full-time person, which we knew at that point, because we were then in the mindset of we're going to sell this business or we're going to leave it with someone to run for us. It was a minimum 2 person affair because of the amount of sort of managerial and practical stuff that needed to be done. So we were at that point. So and if I back up, sorry, when we hired that person full-time, our first full-timer, we disclosed to him, before he signed his contract, we disclosed to him that we were planning to sell or hand it off to someone. So he was aware of that. And so initially it was funny because initially he was like, oh, I don't want to be I don't want to own this business. Like I'll be your general manager. You get me trained up to the point where I know how to do everything, and then I'll, you know, and then about, I don't know, a couple of months down the road from that conversation, he said, I think I want to own, I don't want to work for you. I want to own that. So we were
Brilliant.
great. We said, great. Okay, let's start talking about, a figure. So concurrent to that, we were going to boat shows, and I already had a bunch of like contacts here from going to boat shows and looking at boats and so we basically, picked a boat, put a deposit down for a new build, which at the time was actually less money than a used boat. So after COVID, immediately after COVID, these like sailing yachts were in like massive demand. We heard anecdotal, sort of second, third hand stories about people, being anchored in a bay in Greece and having someone motor up and saying, "I'll give you $1 million for your boat right now, cash right now." Like that's sort of the demand they were in. So at the time, used boats were actually more affordable
because you don't have to wait
than used boats, or than new boats rather. So anyway, but we had a time. So it was about 1.5 years from the time we paid deposit before we would take delivery, which gave us the time to get the gym
start
ready,
the business.
start the business.
So let's jump ahead quickly. So I came down to Portsmouth. You guys at that point, you'd got the boat. It had been sailed from France, where it was built.
From France, from La Rochelle,
back over,
France,
and you guys had moved onto the boat, and I came and stayed with you guys. That was really kind of the start of the boat. So just what did you realize? Because there's one thing having a dream and whatever. Then there's the right. This is our home, and it's what were some of the realizations?
So I'll go back even a step further. In order to move on to the boat, I mean, we sold the business, we sold our house, we had to downsize, and I wouldn't even. I would suggest that we had to minimize, which in my mind is a degree of magnitude more than downsizing. So I'll tell you what, it was a real life lesson. I couldn't believe how much shit we had. And this is after, so I was posted to the UK by the army. I had to leave about 1/3 of my stuff that I own, furniture, whatever, in Canada in storage because our house in the UK wasn't as big as our house in Canada. Then I'd gone through a divorce where I think I said, last time we chatted, I came out of the divorce with a couple pieces of furniture and an IKEA bag and my briefcase and my uniforms, like nothing. Cara had moved from the US back to the UK, so downsized there to move into a smaller, and then divorce, downsize again. So we'd already both been through two tranches of downsizing, and then we had to move on to the boat. And I remember we moved on to the boat, physically moved on to the boat, and we had so much stuff that we were like cramming it in corner, like clothes and kitchen stuff. We thought we'd minimized, and we had to minimize again because there wasn't enough space for stuff, and we ended up leaving stuff with friends
So I was, and this is a naive, a bit idealistic actually. That was one of the things that struck me when I came onto the boat. It was like, fuck, I'd love to be forced to downsize like that. And I mean it in a sense that, it's like we have all this stuff. I mean, in this house, there is every nook and cranny stuffed with it just shit you don't need and never going to look again. And probably some of it I don't even remember I have in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And where it came from. And I remember being in the boat, everything had its place.
Yeah.
Right? Everything had its place.
No space.
You have to.
There's just no space, right?
I mean, your boat was lovely. There's a lot of space.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's
not
all
compared
relative.
to a house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, in a way, it's like your house burned down. Your house caught fire and you had 15 minutes to grab some clothes and like your important,
laptop, wallet, phone,
birth certificate, your laptop, your phone, your important documents that you keep in the safe or whatever. And that's it. But of course it's intentional and it's more incremental than that. But also as a part of that, because what we obviously downsized over a period of 8 or 10 months or a year. Once we'd made this decision, we started getting rid of stuff that, do I need to have 3 suits? I don't need 3 suits. I don't need any suits. I'm only going to ever wear bathing suits again, or that kind of a thing. And in the process of doing that, we realized how little value all these things are. And I mean like hard monetary value. So I had, for example, prior to moving to the UK, I bought a couple of new suits in Canada because I knew that my job would include occasions where I had to wear civilian, business attire, or even like a bit fancier, sort of. So I bought a couple of like not crazy expensive, like $1,200, $1,500 jacket and trouser kind of suits. We tried to sell them on Vinted, Facebook Marketplace. I think, and Cara will correct me because I won't get this number right, but I think we got something like £15 for both of them.
Staggering, isn't
They're
it?
literally worth nothing. So that's how little all this shit we have that you spend thousands and thousands over a period of years, thousands of pounds or dollars on, is actually worth nothing.
Just as a side, and I don't want to go to the rabbit hole, I actually was reading something this morning. You're familiar with the expression, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Where we've got to is I buy, therefore I am. That's consumerism, right? That determines. So anyway, that's a conversation for a different day.
So you asked me what we learned. That was the very first thing.
Yeah.
Was like all like and as you said, it would be downsizing, minimizing was so satisfying. Yeah. Now, have we taken great pleasure since we've made the decision to stop sailing and move back onto land and all that? There has been great pleasure. Like I now own 3 pairs of jeans instead of 1, skinny jeans, baggy
Luxury.
jeans, and it's like and both of us have taken great pleasure in,
4 pairs of shoes now.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've got now lifting shoes, running shoes. We didn't, on the boat, that stuff, this is just irrelevant. One pair, I had 2 pairs of flip-flops because those were like the most important shoes you could own, and just the cheap ones. Like, anyways, it was extremely satisfying to do that, but also shocking to learn that all of this stuff, particularly if it's got a brand on it, that we spend so much money on, is actually not just in a subjective, of course it's worthless. Like, is a Calvin Klein suit actually worth anything in a philosophical sense? Of course not. But it's actually not worth anything in a practical sense.
So what did you pay for?
Yeah.
So you then sailed, you hired a skipper, I think, to then sail from Portsmouth into the Med.
Right.
And I'm just thinking now, you'd sailed a lot in Canada, you'd sailed in the in the Caribbean. What was it like then sailing off this magnificent island we're currently on?
I mean, dude. So we hired a skipper. There were two reasons. One was imposed on us by our insurance company for very good reason, because neither of us, myself included, had any experience sailing in true tidal conditions. And the south coast of the UK, for our Canadian friends, is like the Bay of Fundy. The entire south coast of the UK is like the Bay of Fundy. The marina that we kept the boat in, where you visited us, had 16-foot tides, was like the average height of tide. You were blown away by it, right? So that makes for extremely technical, not sailing. Like, sailing is sailing. You trim the sails, you point the boat where you want it to go, you steer it. But the decision-making, the planning, the understanding the conditions you're going to be in, where you can and can't go because of the depth of the water, where you can and can't go because the tide creates current, which then the current may actually be significantly faster than your boat can actually go, which means that you're not going where you want to go. You're going where the current is taking you, which can then lead to really... So anyways, so that was imposed on us, but I also recognized, I was pretty intimidated by the idea of just getting off the south coast of England, and then crossing the channel, and then sailing down the entire west coast of Europe to the Mediterranean.
I'm pretty sure that's why this country's always had a strong navy. Because
Absolutely.
you learn.
Absolutely.
It's you either
Man,
drown or you
it is
become a good
wild.
sailor.
So we hired the skipper, and our boat broker was fantastic. They, recommended a bunch of people to us, and we ended up with this young fella named Toby, who was like phenomenal, like 30, 33 or something, had basically been sailing since he was a toddler, had more sailing experience and knowledge than I think I could, literally had didn't go to uni, not even sure he finished high school. Like he just knew sailing. Right.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely brilliant. And not only a brilliant sailor, but actually a really good teacher and mentor. He was really good at like making me feel, like allowing me and helping me to be part of the decision making and the conversation, and then saying, well, that, just silly things, and you've mentored and stuff in your career, like, that's a great, I agree completely, Tim, like, but we actually also have to consider this, and you go, oh yeah, right,
It's good coaching.
So we left Southampton. We were in Southampton, not Portsmouth, but not the rest.
Yeah.
So we left Southampton. We went down the Solent, which is like the sort of big bay from the port of Southampton that opens up. And then the Isle of Wight is a big island that's on the just kind of not far, a couple miles from there, but very tidal. And we started working our way down the west coast of England because of the sort of prevailing weather. And this is stuff I didn't know anything about. So thank God we had a skipper, but because I would have just gone around the Isle of Wight, pointed at France and gone across. But you actually have to try to get, in most conditions, you have to try to get as far west down the south coast as you can before you can then sail, southeast, southeast across the channel to get to France. And it was April, like the weather was just fucking shit. Like it was horrific.
It's not the Caribbean.
It's not the Caribbean. And like, just a funny aside. So, one of the things we had to buy safety is like what they call foul weather gear. Mm-hmm. So foul weather gear typically is like, waterproof, like basically wellies, rubber boots, like long bib trousers that are waterproof and insulated. And then a big jacket that's waterproof and insulated, and typically has a really, really high collar, so you can, keep the water out of the inside of your clothes and stuff. So it's kind of like what in Canada we have, like when you're a kid, you have a snowsuit, and it's the same thing. It's like a bib trousers, and then a big warm coat, and you can go out and dig snow forts and roll around and make snow angels and have snowball fights and all that stuff we do as kids in Canada. So for me, having grown up like that and then being in the army. So in the army, we had for our, winter operations, we had the equivalent of a kid's snowsuit. So for me, wearing that amount of clothing and working in that amount of clothing, was just second nature. Well, for Cara, being British, she was like, we would do things like, can you go up forward and open up the anchor locker and just, fiddle fix something, and she'd be like, like, I can't even, like, how do you even squat down with all these clothes on? Like, she just hated it, but there was no choice, because of the conditions, the cold weather and the cold water.
No, I get it. Yeah.
You have to wear that stuff. So anyway, so we're in this like foul weather gear where Cara basically just looked like, eyes, and she'd be so cold, just sitting like, are you okay, sweetheart? I'm okay. But anyway, so it took us about a week, if I recall, to even set off to get across the channel. So we just kept going further and further west down the south coast. I think we got to Weymouth before we made one attempt to get, so Toby looked at the weather, and then the other thing you have to look at is like the tides can affect things like the height of the waves. So it might not be that windy and there might not be like big waves like offshore, but because of the way the tides are moving, they can cause the waves to become higher and closer together. And so that's a big factor as well, because, a small boat like ours can only contend with waves. Yeah. You can contend with really, really massive waves if they're a kilometer apart, because you hardly even notice it. They're like big rolling hills, but they're
close together.
But a 12-foot wave or a 16 or 20-foot wave that's close together now becomes like so steep that you can't. But anyway, so we tried, and we like gotten in these conditions with these crazy steep waves, and like, you know, and it was literally like, okay, Tim, we need to turn the boat around. And I was like, holy shit, how are we gonna do that? Because if you get sideways onto the waves, you can get rolled over, right? He's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm like, yes, you are, Toby. You're gonna do it, because there's no fucking way I'm gonna try to do that, right? So we had tried once to get, and of course, and Cara was just seasick, like, you know, like out of commission.
This is the dream, right?
Yeah. This is the dream, exactly. Don't worry, we just got to get to the Mediterranean. It'll be fine. So eventually we got across to Cherbourg relatively uneventfully, which was like, you know, just like mind blowing for me, because although I'd chartered in Mallorca, so I'd come in and out of Palma de Mallorca harbor, which is quite a busy harbor with big ships and ferries and all that. But like going across the English Channel, where it's like going across the M4,
like rush hour,
you know, like cars, across, you know, these huge tankers going in both directions, and you're like, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. You know, but I mean, everything's like at a snail's pace. But everything's at a snail's pace. You go 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, but
you're going. And you're going, and those freighters, you know, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm like, oh, you keep going, little. So anyway, so we got across the channel, and then we started working our way down down the west coast of Europe, you know, Spain, Portugal, and so on down to Gibraltar.
And Tim, I'm going to jump track quickly.
Sure, yeah.
So I was there, and I mean, you guys spent 2 summers sailing in the Med. 2 summers sailing in the Med. You know, you had Addie come join you, your mum and dad, and friends stuff, and I came and spent it was an awesome week with you. And ultimately, you know, you've got stage now where, again, you know, you guys have decided, right, you're going to sell the boat, and there's another evolution on the horizon.
Right.
What I would like to do, if you don't mind, is now maybe go back a little bit into, you know, your military experiences.
Sure.
I remember one thing specifically when, with the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, and you know, you'd been there, and that it'd be good if you could share that. I was you know, with you at the gym during that time.
Sure.
And I think, you know, that's such a it's something that you can talk about, that people read about. It's not the same when you actually realize, you know, shit, this is real. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and then kind of, you know, maybe we can go wherever you want to go in terms of the genesis of that.
Sure, yeah.
Just move your mic down just a little bit. Just pull your arm down.
Sorry, down?
Yeah, just pull it down a little bit if you can. Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right.
No, I don't want it to hide your face.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, so I think in general, the failure of our many years of efforts in Afghanistan for most veterans was not surprising, but also quite, maybe not emotional, maybe that's not the right word, but it was profound. You know, when you think, I'm sure, you know, the obvious parallel is the Vietnam War for American soldiers who served in the Vietnam War and did, you know, multiple tours or whatever. To just see this thing that was so central and pivotal in your life, and for many years, you know, I think Canada was in Afghanistan for 13 or 14 years. So most guys and gals went back multiple times, and obviously, you know, different sort of landscapes in the broadest sense of that conflict over that period of time. So when it all came crashing down in a matter of weeks, and, you know, the Americans withdrew, and, you know, immediately the Taliban just sort of started regaining, you know, and I remember sort of daily in the BBC and stuff, you know, well, the Taliban have advanced and they've taken this town and this town, and such an Afghan unit has surrendered or abandoned their equipment and walked away into the, you know, hinterland, and you know, Kabul is, they're on the outskirts. It must have been the same for American vets of Vietnam as they watched, the American embassy being evacuated out of Saigon and all of that back in the mid 70s. Certainly not surprising to any of us. I mean, I think by the end we all realized that it wasn't, that our mission wasn't going to be successful in that country for a number of reasons, many reasons. But anyways, so you're right. So we were, I think, in year one of the gym at that point, so not to be melodramatic about it, but in the background of my personal life, this was going on, this thing that had been such a part of my, the first half of my career as a soldier was Bosnia. And I went 3 times over that period of time, 3 deployments to Bosnia or what was Yugoslavia over that. And then, 2001, I was actually in Bosnia on 9/11, came back, and a year and a half later, I was in Afghanistan. And then the second part of my professional career was Afghanistan, and then a little bit Iraq for Canada, because we weren't involved in the initial bits in Iraq in 2003, but later we were. But anyway, the global war on terror, as we all called it. So, I mean, for me, it was a difficult time sort of psychologically, because I'm at the gym and I'm like, hey guys, question of the day, and, great job, Steven, add another 5 kilos, or, like all that, just coaching and being, running this business. But at the same time, sort of watching this thing fall apart that was such a big part of my life. And obviously a huge amount of emotional investment, whether it was sort of, I've put all this time of my life and effort into this thing that is falling apart, but also like, friends who died, and
people went there, people died there.
Trauma, the traumas of it. And again, not to be melodramatic, but friends died. I saw friends die. Friends were injured. I was, part of all of that. And of course we did, horrible things. It was a war. We did terrible things, but in all of that, out of the blue, I got this Facebook message. And of course, we're very attuned to social media at the time because of the gym business. And I had this Facebook message from someone with an Arabic type name. And I read it, and it was just stilted English, and and I kind of thought it was one of those. Well, I did think initially that it was one of those, I'm a Nigerian prince,
and I want to give you all this money.
Yeah, kind of things. So I just deleted it. And, we were, Cara and I both at the time were very, everything was public. All of our social media was public. We had the gym stuff, and we were, but I mean, that's all part of that business, is using social media to reach people and market and everything else. So anyway, so I got this Facebook message, and I didn't even really think anything of it. I just thought, oh, this is some spammer, or maybe it's someone from Afghanistan, but it's like Taliban, or, like it's, my military officer, army officer brain is like, don't engage with that, right?
Threat?
Delete it. Don't engage with that. So over the span of a few days or a week or so, I got a bunch more of these messages. And then I had in the middle of the night, like, I'd never received a Facebook audio call before, but my phone starts ringing at like 2:00 in the morning, and it's this person. And I'm like, this is creepy. And of course it woke us up. And so Carr said, oh, I forgot to tell you, I had a message from this same, and I was like, you need to delete, you need to block it. Like, maybe now I'm thinking, okay, my name's in a database somewhere. There's Taliban guys that are, that are trying to disrupt, like, no, I'm not worried somebody's going to come.
No.
I was never important enough in any context that, someone's going to come and kill me. Like, and that's movie stuff anyway, but like, it's just like, okay, this is danger, stay away from this, delete, block, whatever. And then about a day or two later, I think we were at the gym. I think I was probably at the gym working, like coaching a class or something. I had another Facebook message from this guy. And in the Facebook message was a photo of a certificate that I had given to one of my interpreters in 2008 in Afghanistan. And it was like one of these, like, thanks for your service. Like, all these guys, that the locals that worked for us, wanted something, they
Proof.
some
Something.
tangible thing that it's almost like a CV, so it was a certificate from NATO and the Canadian Army, thank you for serving the Canadian Army and blah, 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 signed Captain Tim Partello. And I was like, goosebumps. How did this guy get this? And then immediately followed was a bunch of photos that only my team have of an IED strike that we were involved in, where one of my guys was wounded really, really badly. And no one has those. Like, we took those, like me and my guys took those photos, and shared them amongst each other. There was no one else there except the Taliban and this interpreter. And so then I mean, like, what do I do? Well, I have to, anyways. So long story short, I respond to this guy, because now I know he's actually, like, on the balance of probabilities.
This is the right now is Kabul is falling.
Oh,
right?
literally, yeah. Kabul is
Literally,
falling. And the messages had sort of been like, I need your help. Could you please respond to me? Like, but again, really, really generic. And like, I don't know, is this like, who is this guy? Some scammer or whatever. So anyways, but with the photographs, I was like, holy crap. So, so I responded, and that led to a conversation, and, basically, legitimized that this guy was a guy, a gentleman, an Afghan gentleman who had fairly good English at the time, and had taken a job as an interpreter with the coalition forces, and had ended up being assigned to my team for actually a relatively short period of time. I think maybe a month or 6 weeks or something. But had been with us on this day when we had hit an improvised explosive device with my vehicle, and we'd been ambushed afterwards, and it turned into this big drama. And one of my guys was wounded very, very badly. Has since recovered, but at the time it was, pretty catastrophic for us and for me as the team leader. So this guy had been there. He was our interpreter that day that went out on the mission with us. And then sort of learned that in the year since, he'd been married. He had 4 kids, including an infant, all young. Like, the oldest at the time was like 14 or something. Had his younger sister living with him, and he had applied. So most of us, I believe the UK and the US had a similar, like, we had these programs that sort of fast tracked immigration for people who had worked for us in Afghanistan. And so he had already applied to that program in the weeks sort of preceding this catastrophic collapse of the government in Afghanistan. But in the collapse of the government, of course, the Canadian embassy evacuated all the paperwork's lost. So he provided me copies of all this paperwork, and I subsequently wrote him a letter, kind of attesting to his identity and to his character, kind of a thing. And then Kabul collapsed. And so there was a period of, I think maybe it was 10 days or 2 weeks, where it was really kind of reminiscent to something you would have seen, or a story of the Nazi occupation days of Western Europe. He and his family, 4 children, including an infant, younger sister and wife, are on the run. There's sort of a bit of an underground railroad, if you're not familiar with that term, was a term in the United States and Canada during the days of slavery, where people would help smuggle slaves to Canada to be free. So he was moving almost nightly from house to house, and he would be staying with friends or something in a house in Kabul, and they would find out that the neighbors had found out that they were there, and that neighbors had a connection with the Taliban, and so they would have to then, in the middle of the night, move on. And I mean, Kabul was all Taliban checkpoints, and the Taliban had lists, like any of these regimes, brutal regimes. They had lists of all the people that had opposed them, including people who had worked for the coalition, and they were kill lists. So they were on the lookout. There were incentives for people to report that your next door neighbors got strangers staying with them, and all that sort of a thing. So over this sort of week or 10 days, he's sort of on the run with his family, and I'm getting these messages. And I think we were chatting earlier, and at one point, I was coaching a class, and my phone buzzed. Of course, I was like, glued to my phone, which is a bad thing to do as a CrossFit coach. But I was glued to my phone, and I got this message, and I glanced down at my phone to check it, and it was a WhatsApp message from him, and it just said, "Sir, please pray for us."
Oh man!
I'm
Oh
like,
man.
holy fuck,
Oh
you
man.
know, walk away,
Yeah.
sort myself out, message back, like, what's happening? You know, what's happening? Is everything okay? You know, kind of a thing. So, and anyways, um, so over a sort of 10-day or 2-week period, Kabul had fallen, and then the airport. So all the Western forces and governmental elements and everything collapsed in on Kabul International Airport, which was also like a big fortified NATO
Mm.
base,
Mm.
with high concrete walls all around it and everything, and guard towers and machine guns and all that sort of thing. And primarily the U.S. forces, but also some Brits and
Mm.
Canadians and other, NATO nations, essentially were in the watchtowers. And you'll remember from the news reports at the time, thousands, tens of thousands of people crowding against these walls and
Trying to get in.
passing
Mm.
babies up to
Mm.
19-year-old U.S. Marines, like, please take my baby.
Mm.
And then there was a massive suicide bombing,
Yeah.
and over 100 people were killed. 100 of these people that were trying to get in were killed. There was quite a large movement amongst primarily veterans, but also a lot of serving people in the military and in government in Canada, the US, UK sort of countries, that had people like me. So, for example, I had a war correspondent journalist who was a good mate of mine in Afghanistan. We stayed friends for many years afterwards, who just passed away actually before Christmas. But and his fixer, because he went back and forth to Afghanistan many times over a period of, so his fixer, who he hired whenever he was in Afghanistan as his driver, as his translator, was in the same position. So, his
Yeah.
name's Stephen as well. So Stephen, called me. Do you know anybody?
How
Do you
do I
know how
get
I can
this
help
guy
this
out?
guy?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. So there was essentially a very organic grassroots network of people, um, who were like me, like no longer on the inside of
Yeah.
the government and military, but also people who were still connected via now doing contract work,
Yeah.
military contract work, governmental contract work, and also people still on the inside, as well as people who were ex-military or who now worked in banking. So there was this huge sort of grassroots. It all switched to Telegram, which supposedly can't be monitored, and there was funds made available to people. There was information shared, that was, I personally believe, came from classified sources, but was then leaked to this network of many, 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 like probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people like me
To help people get out.
to help people get out. So that literally became this sort of like, okay, the latest. So I'd be on WhatsApp with Samim, is the fellow's name, and saying like, okay, so you need to go to the southwest corner of Kabul airport perimeter, which of course is, imagine putting a wall
Huge.
around
Yeah.
Heathrow, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
massive. And you need to look for a sign that says gate, whatever. You're going to have to pass through a Taliban checkpoint on the way there, but they can be bought. You need $200 and you buy your family through. And this, I'm sort of paraphrasing a whole bunch
Yeah.
of little
Yeah.
micro events, but essentially we got people in and to the right place, because there were only certain places where the coalition forces were allowing, even screening people to allow them in. And then, like, one day after 10 days or 2 weeks or something, I got a WhatsApp message it was just a photo of him and two of his kids inside a Canadian transport aircraft.
I've got goosebumps. I would literally.
Yeah.
I remember you told me at the time. I've literally got goosebumps. It's like.
Yeah.
And you went. Did one of his children get married?
Yeah, we went
You
went and
went to.
visited him. My youngest daughter Allie and I went and had lunch with their family, a year later or something, after they'd gotten, they were in Canada and they've settled in Canada, and kids were in school, and then even in Canada, this network of veterans and stuff. So I had a couple of friends, and some people I had never met before, but who were also veterans, helping the family with clothes, with finding a place to live, get your kids in school, get mom in English classes, get the kids laptop computers so they can, do like all this stuff. Because of course they literally turned up with the clothes on their backs. Right. So Allie and I went and visited them. It was very, emotional. just profound, and also quite uncomfortable for me because they're so thankful
I mean,
to me.
yeah, I was going to say
To you know,
you're
it's
the
too much
reason
for
they
me. It's too
exist.
much. It's just like,
Yeah.
and I mean that culture is very. They're very formal in that culture, anyways, and so like Samim calls me sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I said, don't call me sir. Just call me Tim, dude. We're mates. No, no. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll call you Tim, sir. Like so and then it's, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And, they had Ali and I there for lunch, and it was like, they treated us like royalty.
Mm.
They gave us all these gifts, and they served all this Afghan food, like enough food for 20 people, and they're like living on welfare in Canada, trying to, get their lives started there. Anyways, and then later we went to a wedding. The sister got married, so we got invited to the wedding, and along with a couple of other friends of ours who had helped with this whole process, either getting them out of Afghanistan or getting them set up in Canada. So, but yeah, man, and sometimes this is not entirely true, but I do think in an objective way, it's the one good thing that came out of that war for me. I mean, there's tons of good, life experiences and friends and maturing and there's lots of good things subjectively, but in an objective sense, that family now lives in Canada. Yeah. Their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, 4 generations from now, will live, presumably, knock on wood, live a much better life than they ever would have lived, or they'd be dead.
I'll be more direct. I was going to say, Tim, they would be dead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, that they would be dead. Full stop.
Likely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Taliban regime is pretty unforgiving for people who helped us, right?
Yeah. Listen, thanks for that. I think that's, it's part of you, and I suppose in a strange way, part of, that it happened to happen at the time, soon after we'd met and whatever. We're gonna wrap, but
it's funny how the time just
no, it's
and it's
it's
it's like we don't have a pint or anything, but it's like we're just sat here having a pint. And
I know, but I mean, it's so we're gonna wrap, but we're gonna wrap with, because I'm gonna come visit you guys, because we've gone through, you went sailing, and we've got to the Med, and you spent 2 summers in the Med, but Tim's changed again. It's now it's evolution number XYZ or whatever. So there's more to uncover in that one.
Part 3.
Could be. Well, anyway, I'm coming to visit you guys anyway. Thanks, my friend.
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And I mean, that closing on that was not meant to kind of bring everything down. It's actually the opposite. I mean, it's a profound, that could not impact you. And you're right about how you feel about it. And I think that's exactly how you should feel about it.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Thanks, man.